My name is Simon Qulity and I'm a general physician in Katherine in remote Northern Territory. So to influence somebody, you first need to understand their paradigm of beliefs, their worldview, and also particularly their views of health and well-being. And my very privileged position working with some of the most remote people in the Northern Territory has given me an amazing 6 years and some insights into Mary's distrust of her doctors. This is an image of this is the photo you'll get if you do a Google search for herbal medicine. If you search for doctor's medicine, this is the image that you get. And Mary has a life that's pretty hard. Unlike most of us in the audience that are privileged, Mary's worldview will be very different, and I think I have a little bit of insights into that. One of the great privileges of working with a very ancient race of people every day is that you have a mirror of your own culture. And I get this insight into myself all of the time. I feel like I learn more about myself than I do about my patients, although I'm slowly chipping away. This is the first recorded copy of Hippocrates' Oath. And this is where our paradigm started in our ancestors. We all have behind us hundreds, if not thousands, of generations that have led us to take for granted a lot of what we perceive about the world. And we have a very powerful science behind us. I took this photo on Thursday in Manu in the middle of the Tanami Desert. This is Jerry Patrick, and he's given me permission to tell you some stories today. I've known Jerry for 4 years, and I feel like I'm in the presence of a king when I'm with Jerry. He was 15 or 16 years old. He doesn't quite know because age isn't counted in years. When he first met white people, when he first realised and his tribe first realised that something was dramatically changing. And Jerry was telling me on Thursday what it is to be a nunkari, or a traditional healer. So apparently, and this is still very much a part of his lived experience and expectation, a nunkari is identified in childhood when you sleep near the bloodwood trees. The nunkari spirit, the ancestor spirit, will come and touch you at night and wake you up, and you will tell your family in the morning, and then you will get embedded into a cultural process of knowledge gathering. And Jerry told me today that he wanted me to express that he felt that we as doctors have the same power as he as nunkari. And he did it in a way to express his respect for you. He wasn't saying that it was legitimate for him to be the same as us. He was saying, you guys are as lucky as we are. And he respects our ways. This is a chest x-ray similar to that of one of Jerry's contemporaries, another very old man from Manu, who's had a different experience in the colonisation wave, and he was not trusting of white people, which is true of many, if not most, Aboriginal people that I look after in the Tanami Desert. He came into the hospital and a junior doctor came to me. She was female and she knew it was inappropriate for her to be talking to an old man, and this old man was in the emergency department with a lactic acidosis, hypotensive and in septic shock. And he was insisting on discharge, so I went into the room with him and I said, listen, old man, I believe that if you don't stay in hospital, you will pass away in the next few days, particularly if you're travelling 550 kilometres out into the desert. And he said to me, you white fellas, you're all the same, don't you understand? We've all got to die, and I want to see a nunkari, and if I die, I want to be on my homelands. And the wonderful creative sphere that we all have as doctors, and that I'm extremely privileged to have in Katherine, is this space where you suddenly recognise what's gone wrong. And so I had a split moment. I'd realised this old man, firstly, had had probably some trauma with his interaction with white people, but secondly, he saw me as a doctor, and what he saw doctors doing was distributing tablets. Now, to consider what preventative healthcare means, you have to have a word for tomorrow, and there's no Walpurgis word for tomorrow. They live in the moment. and it is just not part of their world paradigm. So I had this little brief insight, and I took a moment and said to this old man, listen, I think there's been a misunderstanding. I think that maybe what I mean by doctor is the same as healer. Maybe not nunkary, but certainly a similar thing. I think I'm a healer like what you want to see. And he stepped back, and I used a couple of Indigenous words, which I'm slowly learning, which impressed him greatly. And he said, are you really a healer? And I said, well, without being condescending and trying to broach this extraordinary gap, yes, I think I'm a healer. I'm here to make you live longer, and I'm here to make you feel better. And he took 10 seconds, and he said, all right, I'll stay. And he stayed for 2 days, 3 days actually, and then he discharged on his own terms, a little bit before I wanted him to, but on his own terms, and with respect for me, and with a knowledge that I respected him, and we still know each other, and we've got a lovely relationship. So to explain some of the other nuances that I'm talking about, this is an image of Lucky Dubé. He died recently. He's a reggae singer from South Africa, and he's in 2005, his name was everywhere in the far north of Australia as a black rights activist and an amazing musician. And I heard that he was coming to Darwin, and so I went to the showground to see him perform, and there were about 100 white faces and well over 5,000 or 6,000 Aboriginal people present. The concert was amazing, and he was very charismatic, and he did this amazing riff at the end and jumped off stage, and I started cheering, and all of the Aboriginal people in front of me turned around and looked at me, and I realised that the whole audience was a bit offended that he'd finished his concert in such an abrupt way. And the whole audience started moving away en masse from the stage. And the event organiser jumps up on stage and says, hey, you mob, if you come back here and cheer real loud, he'll come back and play more songs. So the audience turns back and comes up, and there's nearly a riot because Lucky Dubé is offended. Anyway, it wasn't a riot, and it all calmed down, and every day in Katherine I live in this beauty of experience and an understanding that we have a very strong paradigm that we find hard to see out of, but when you look out of it, it is beautiful. And Aboriginal people are very forgiving of me, or most are very forgiving of me through my stumbling of cultural insensitivities. I'd like to go a little bit deeper now about Indigenous spirituality and health and well-being, something that I'm slowly coming to terms with because it is so deep and rich and private. People are very willing to share their stories, but they are not used. There's a trust issue. So there's a crow story. When I was a medical student, I was out in Far East Arnhem Land, and I'd been taken hunting with a family. Only I'd been left with the ladies because I was a white man and I was way too noisy to take hunting with the men. So I sat down with the ladies and cooked and talked and waited for the men to come back. And then one of the old ladies said, oh, they're coming back, here's my crow. And she pointed up into the tree and there's a crow. And I said, what do you mean your crow? And she said, well, that's my crow and Jimmy's got his crow, her husband. And when we were married, the crows came with us. And my understanding is that somehow for those people, their marriage ceremony was around the breeding cycle of the crows, and a pair of crows were attached to them. And at first I doubted the validity. You know, they're all black creatures that are hard to differentiate. But then I started to realise that if you live in a world where you can't move faster than the pace of your legs ever, of course this is possible that crows can keep up with you. And of course, crows are very intelligent animals. There can be a symbiosis that we urban people have no idea about. And then when you think about it even deeper than that, 65,000 years of the crow's ancestors living with this family's ancestors develops a relationship between the environment and humans in ways that us urban people, most of us urban people, cannot even comprehend. It is deep and it is rich and it is true knowledge. And that true knowledge, the way that it was translated was verbally. This is an image by an artist called Dick Ruffsey, who lived in the Atherton Tablelands. And that mountain there is called Mount Quincon. Mount Quincon was a volcano that erupted 20,000 years ago. And in their Dreamtime stories, they talk about a mountain that spewed fire all over the earth. And this is a group of people that would have never been exposed to any other part of the world where they would have seen a volcano. So that's a 20,000-year-old story. We don't have anything written that's 20,000 years. So the whole way that communication works is different and rich. And you have to be very quiet to hear it and stay around to understand it. And it exists across this country, underneath our feet, in different ways. And so every part of Australia there is opportunities to learn about this if you can find the right people to teach you. So I'd like to finish with a bit of reflection about influencing the life course with this last story. I was in Alice Springs as a junior doctor, and I had a pressure of trying to prove that the old lady had dementia, an old Pinterby lady. And she was clearly demented with sundowning, and her two sons were there, and I said to them, I tried to go through the MMSE, which didn't work very well, and they kept on looking at me as I was getting more and more frustrated in my questions. And finally I said, don't you think that there's anything wrong with this old lady? And they looked at me, and they were cranky, and they said, she's just an old lady. And I realised at that point that they were right and I was wrong. And what I've realised over the years since, that for many people that I look after, their view of dementia is one of a liberation of the soul and something to be cherished. And I told my elderly aunt this story yesterday. I gave her a run through of this program, and when I told her that story, she got quite emotional. And she said to me, I had no idea that I'm very afraid of the word dementia, and you have just rephrased it in a way that is not frightening. And so learning to interrupt and understand all of our patients, particularly those who are Indigenous or from social disadvantage, is really important. And if we want to influence health, not only do we have to understand those on the other side of the table, but we also have to learn from them. Thank you.